Lena noticed the shadow, only because it was being polite about it. The bulb ticked. The filament sighed. The darkness on her bedroom wall leaned aside the way a stranger does when you're both passing in a narrow doorway. She told herself it was heat shimmer or the tired brain's trick, except the shadow's head tilted as if it understood it was being observed. That was intention, not physics. One leg was still halfway into her jeans, the other braced on the mattress, when the room's ordinary shapes seemed to hold their breath. There were no eyelids, no mouth, only an indentation where eyes ought to be, a ripple in black that studied her without blinking. The lamp dimmed to a dull bruise. The shoulders of the shadow drew tight, gathering itself like someone deciding whether to knock. A seam appeared in the paint, a smile the color of ash. Lena grabbed her phone. No service. The home Wi-Fi had been sick for days. She thumbed the flashlight on, and the cone of white tore the room into obedient pieces. Concert posters, a drift of laundry, a silver hair tie, the mirror's thin edge catching the doorframe. The moving dark fled, thinning like smoke and wind. The seam closed as if embarrassed to have been seen. Then the light died, not with a flicker but with a swallow. Her bed turned into a raft afloat on black water. "Hello?" she whispered, because silence felt like permission. The word came back changed, hollowed out, as if the room had grown enormous. The corner beyond the mirror sank deeper than corners should, a new geometry that did not belong to the house. Something stood there, taller than the doorway, more certain than furniture. It pressed an invisible head against the frame like a bored visitor who already knew she would open. "Mom?" she tried, and the house listened and decided not to answer. She pulled the lamp chain. Click, nothing. Air prickled around her arms with the static certainty of hands hovering, patient and undecided. She crawled backward until her spine found the headboard and did the trick she'd read for panic. Name 5 things you can see: bedspread, shoe, curtain, mirror, shadow. The last word scratched her throat like a dare. The hallway outside breathed, floorboards settling, or someone waiting their turn. Time tipped like a tray. "I'm not scared," Lena said, which was both brave and untrue. The corner unfolded its height. When it moved, it didn't walk. It arrived. The room collapsed to the distance between her and the dark. Somewhere inside the walls, a switch clicked. The lamp flared. For one rigid heartbeat, the figure had edges and weight. A hint of a face turned toward her, as if remembering what faces were for. Then the bulb popped. Every light in the house surrendered at once. The last thing she saw before the dark sealed her in was the shadow leaning its knot face close enough that she could hear it breathe like paper. The sound mapped the shape of the room, and her name, and the precise contour of where her fear ended and something else began. Her mother found her at dawn, sitting on the rug, knees to chest. Hair bristled, as if the night had climbed it. "Power's out again?" her mother asked, cheerful in the careful adult way that means, "Don't make me name it." By 9, everything blinked back on, without anyone touching a breaker. Neighbors. Porches glowed. Their house pretended to be normal. On the bus, Lena carried a small animal of dread under her ribs, pretending it was just anxiety. Daylight made her almost believe it. That evening she prepared like a person building a raft in a floodplain, every bulb on, closet door taped, mirror covered with a sheet, phone at a perfect charge. She rehearsed her name softly. "I am Lena Rios. I live here," and wrote it on a notebook in case remembering became difficult. Midnight arrived the way a tide does, without asking. The door's shadow pivoted like a sundial, though her lamps were fixed. The seams in the wallpaper rose, tracked by something underneath with a patient fingernail. The sheet over the mirror puffed and drew in, breathing. Her phone chirped. A message from No Caller ID. "Don't fight US. Join US." Her fingers answered as if someone else were wearing her hands. "Who are you?" The reply arrived instantly. "We are the part you never switch off." The lamp nearest her stuttered like an animal. The room smelled faintly of wet stone. Music drifted from downstairs, an old song her father used to sing off-key. The lights hummed louder until the humming learned words. Between syllables, the dark thickened enough to touch. She raised her hand. It touched back. Not skin, but the idea of skin. A wind that had learned how to hold. The hall beyond her door stretched longer than the house could possibly be, lined with doorways that did not belong to them. Standing still felt more dangerous than moving, so she stepped into it. Each doorway showed her room in a different year. The crib, the fairy lights, the cardboard boxes from last summer's move. In each version, a shadow waited, clearer the younger she became, as if absence had been practicing. The arithmetic of it assembled a truth she didn't want. The thing had been here as long as she had. Halfway down, the hall bent in on itself like paper being folded for a child's fortune teller. A doorway appeared that should have returned her to safety. Instead, it opened into the same hallway, same impossible length, same doorways in the wrong places. Far away, something paced, slow and deliberate, never closer, never farther. The only numbers that mattered were hers, one breath, then another, then another. When she turned back, the door of her room had closed. Her name on the notebook inside waited for a girl who might not be her when she returned. You do not bargain with what wears your house like clothes. You learn its routes the way you learn a bully's path or a dog's bark, or the note before a chorus drops. On the third night, Lena didn't pretend control. She placed offerings of coherence on her nightstand, a glass of water, a list of emergency numbers, a little heap of salt because her grandmother had once said, "Salt remembers your true name." She didn't touch the switches. She lay on the bed and let the ceiling expand and contract like a living thing. Her phone lit by itself. Words slid across the glass as if a careful finger were pulling them. "Stay still. Listen. We are teaching you to stop being afraid." The letters dissolved into a dark smear, then into a hole, and through that hole breathed a roomful of voices repeating her name in every tone she'd ever used on herself. Disappointed, bright, pleading, bored. She covered her ears. Her hands felt the wrong size. The mirror, uncovered now, showed Alina, who blinked a fraction too slow. Her smile arrived late to her mouth. When she lifted a hand, the girl in the glass hesitated, then followed obediently. For a moment, the delay narrowed to nothing, and the relief that rushed her ribs was sharp enough to hurt. Then she saw the difference. The reflected background was not her room. It was a corridor full of standing shapes grouped like mourners at a wake, each with a polished absence where a face should have been. They listened to her breathe. "Tell me what you want," Lena said. The house shifted, mildly interested. The water trembled, the list of numbers turned blank as if relieved of its duties. Her phone rang. The name on the screen was DAD. Hope detonated, messy and immediate, she answered. A breath. A scuffed little laugh she could have drawn from memory. "Mija," he said, voice thin as paper. "Open the door, I'm outside." She ran. The knob was cool. The hall waited, longer than possible. At the far end stood her father, exactly right. Tilt of head, slouch of hands in pockets, the shadow under his jaw. "Come on," he called, the mouth out of sync with the sound coming from the phone speaker. The delay felt like ice beneath her feet. She took one step, then another. The figure didn't advance. It stretched instead, arm rising toward the ceiling as if to pull a cord. Every star in her memory went out at once. The dark leaned forward the way a tide does when it claims shore. Morning brought a brittle courage. Lena skipped school, claimed a headache, and mapped the house like an archaeologist of her own fear. She opened every cabinet and closet, pried off outlet covers, slid a hand mirror along the baseboards to see if darkness had pooled there like a shy animal. When her mother knocked with soup, Lena kept the lies small. "Migraine," she said, and listened to footsteps withdraw down the hall. At sunset, the walls lost their daytime color and took on night geometry. A draft that did not belong to weather stole the warmth and folded it neatly for later. "Okay," she said into the dim, speaking to the edges of the room. "If you want to teach me, use words." The mirror brightened without light. It stopped being a reflection and became a window into a neighboring absence. She saw her bed in it, empty. She saw her own back, small and still on the floor. Then the image looked up and smiled, a smile that belonged to someone who had learned the shape of hers from the wrong side. She didn't scream. Screaming felt like a kind of consent. The mirror Lena stood and crooked a finger. When Lena didn't move, the other Lena placed her palm against the glass from the inside. Frost spidered outward. "Don't," Lena managed. The glass bulged like the skin of a drum. Her hands shook hard enough to blur. The mirror hand slid through up to the wrist and groped for purchase on this side. Behind it, a taller shape rose with the weary patience of a teacher accustomed to difficult students. "Give her back," Lena said, though grammar had left the room hours ago. The tall shape lifted its arm. Corners drank the remaining light. Her phone buzzed in her pocket and displayed a command: "Open the front door, bring US the night." Absurdity saved her. She laughed too loudly. "You already have it," she told the room, and for the first time the dark seemed to hesitate, amused by a student solving a simple problem. The mirror Lena mouthed something Lena couldn't hear. The glass wavered like a pond. There was a sound of something unbuttoning. The taller shape drew closer, and the smell of wet stone came with it, and the house prepared itself to be more than a house. It wasn't darkness, it was attention, the precise heat of a crowd turning its face toward you at once. In that attention, Lena discovered she could move only along the paths the house believed in. "If I step out," she thought, not daring to say it aloud, "do I become part of the mechanism?" All her small agreements, habits, fears, the way she left cups half full, answered yes. The stairs carried her down as if she were water. Each footfall echoed twice, once in her ears, once inside the walls. The front door waited like a molar. Unlocking it felt unnecessary. The night enters whether you invite it or not. She opened it anyway. The street outside was a river that had forgotten how to be quick. Parked cars idled without drivers. Dog leashes trailed themselves. Across the way, black windows bulged outward, as if someone pressed a face from behind the glass. They had been waiting for a girl to make a decision. "What are you?" Lena asked. The wind arranged an answer with grit on the porch boards. "We are the shadows of used choices. We are what houses do with what you leave inside them. We keep it warm until it wears a shape." The porch flexed like a lung. "What do you want from me?" she asked. The night leaned. "To stay, to help US hold the rest." Obedience simplified her down to 2 lines. Stay/run. She remembered Salt. Her grandmother's hand had closed crystals into her palm the day they moved in. "Sprinkle thresholds, Mija." Salt knows. She had laughed then. She didn't now. She tore open the little packet from a forgotten lunch and drew a white line across the doorframe. The house sighed, a sound like 100 wires relaxing. The faces in the windows turned away, offended by a boundary. The attention withdrew to a polite distance. Something paced just beyond the line, wearing her outline like borrowed clothes. "Teach me then," she told what remained. "Teach me how to live with you without becoming you." The night considered. Somewhere above the street, a bulb hummed awake. The porch light bloomed the color of ordinary. It cast small, honest shadows across the threshold. Beyond the salt, something moved but did not cross. Lena felt her name click home like a key finally turned the right way. She closed the door and leaned her forehead against it. The house settled around her, still hungry, but now it knew where hunger ended. In the mirror, her reflection was only her, tired, shaking, alive. Behind her, the wall was clean. She could almost imagine the old, uninteresting quiet returning. She left the salt where it was. Some nights, when the bulb ticks and the corner deepens, a sentence appears faintly on the ceiling, like breath on cold glass. We wait. She answers by saying her name aloud, and by turning on the porch light. Most of the time, that is enough. The rest of the time, the shadows lean politely and do not enter.